Evaluation question 1.
In what ways does your media product use, develop, or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? Research and planning. After researching trailers such as Snatch, Kill Bill, 2012, etc., we knew we had to stick to certain obvious elements, such as the fact that trailers often include hints and snippets of the narrative in the trailer, so the audience has a rough idea of the plot, and also that trailers should give the audience an initial understanding about what genre the film fits into. Therefore, we knew we would have to replicate the same effect by hinting to slight parts of the narrative and introduce various characters and settings briefly. Narrative. We wanted to create a British crime film because the narrative and action that came with the British genre appealed to us because it matched up with lots of ideas that we had come up with previously. Our location ideas would also be more suited to our target audience more than the setting or location-based genre like dystopian would. We researched the British crime genre in depth to find out key things that would be useful for our overall narrative, such as the codes and conventions of crime, drama, genre vary depending on the cultural context of the film. But they are likely to include alcohol, illegal substances, weapons, parties, raves, sex, murders, shootings, relationships, social groups, and gang or turf wars. We also considered other aspects when planning our narrative, such as Todorov's 3-act structure, and also postmodern elements like enigmas and the non-linear concept. Our original idea of an Italian mafia family migrating from America and living in England didn't conform to the original task question because we felt that the Italian theme would have to take over the narrative and become a big part of the film instead of hinting at them. Therefore, it would become hardly a British crime film at all and become just an Italian mafia film, which would take away completely from the set task of it being a British crime film. We changed names of characters and place names, but narrative stayed the same. This was because the British crime films are usually quite light-hearted and with a charming, cheeky, cockney anti-hero or more gritty like The Bank Job. This down-to-earth characterisation makes the audience really warm to the characters and therefore makes them popular and lovable. American crime often takes a more serious route. They tend to include more killings and gangs and have less comedic elements than the British crime genre does. This relates to the Italian mafia, who were around in the 50s and 60s, so therefore we stuck to the British crime genre so the film related to that genre more. Despite our film being more of a serious British crime film as opposed to a comedic one, there are British elements that shine through clearer than the American elements, such as location choices, accents, names and general processes that would work differently in Britain than America, such as the prison sentences and the paths of the characters' lives. Mise-en-scène. Locations are an important part of our mise-en-scène decisions. After looking into it more, we found out that very urban locations are often used to demonstrate realism, and the business of everyday life can reflect the excitement in the narrative. Classy nightlife locations, such as casinos and bars, are used to show the glamour of a respectful criminal such as gangsters. The actual crime often occurs at night to create ambiguity and mystery. This is why we chose to have street locations, especially for the robbery, as well as more rural locations for our trailer, to create a sense of danger and isolation. We also took into account that crimes are generally committed in urban spaces, which is why we decided to have our bank robbery take place on a main street. During our pitch, we talked about an original idea of superhero masks for gang members to challenge character conventions. However, this idea had to be abandoned because we were unable to purchase them. So we used white masks instead, which turned out more effective as it looked less tacky and more professional. The prestige element was taken from films such as The Dark Knight, where the Joker and everyone else who was taking part in the bank robbery were all wearing unusual masks. Our masks in the heist end up being very similar to the masks in V for Vendetta or the masks in Point Break, because we like the simplistic style, so that is another prestige element of our trailer. In terms of lighting, we chose a similar lighting for the restaurant scene as the lighting in the restaurant conversation in Heat, because the tense conversation between De Niro and Al Pacino was similar to what we were trying to capture. Filming and editing. One of the trailers our group especially liked lots after watching the trailer was Snatch. It was very creative and had a fluent, quick succession of shots the whole way through, so we tried to replicate this pace in our trailer. One of the ways we achieved this in our trailer was by having 4 shots towards the end on every beat in quick concession of all the characters. We also planned that as the trailer went on, the pace of shots would increase more and more For example, the pace is slower at the start because there is a variety of long shots, such as one of the cars at night time, which is a time lapse, but towards the end there are more close-ups and mid-shots of the characters' faces. Sound. After discussing plans for the soundtrack with my group, we decided that I should make the soundtrack. I researched soundtracks for a movie trailer more and discovered that in many trailers there was one eerie, slower soundtrack at the start, and then towards the end the pace and texture of the track would build more and more to a climax, possibly with a change of soundtrack completely halfway through. For example, the soundtrack for the trailer for Snatch changes several times. It has a good effect as it always suits the pace and the mood of the shots shown on screen. So I made two soundtracks. One was slow and simple, mainly just eerie guitar in order to create a certain mood and give it an atmospheric feel. And the other soundtrack had a much faster pace and included lots of dark piano. This soundtrack entered the trailer just after a short break when he gets on the motorway, and then as the soundtrack enters, he is then riding the bike in the next shot, so it creates quite an explosive effect. Graphics. For the title font, we researched the fonts that were used in Snatch and Heat, since these were films that we referred to lots of the time. We discovered that throughout most British crime films, the fonts were quite sharp and neat for the credits, and then bigger and rounder for the title. This is why we chose a font called Cheese Pizza for the title, because it was similar to the font for the title of the film Heat. Then we researched the fonts for the credits and found one called Media Gothic, which matched the font at the end of the most films very well, so we used that one because it looked great. Layout and design. When choosing where to place titles in our trailer, we mainly placed them in the most appropriate use of negative space, whereas for our poster and magazine we found it best to place the most important bits of information near the top and left, because that is where the viewers naturally look first. And then the less important pieces of information would go nearer the right and the bottom. We liked the general layout for Sight and Sound magazines, and since it was also more indie films, it appealed to us most for our poster, since our film was an independent one.